All right, let's get going. Welcome, everyone. This is the second candidate forum of the year. To go over our format tonight, after we introduce everybody, we're going to go through the various races. We're going to do Utility Board, Group 2, the County Judge race, the Democratic primary for State Rep, Monroe County School Board, Clerk of Court, and then we'll end up, batting last is United States Congress Democratic primary. To get things going, oh, and we are live streaming. I have confirmation of that because somebody sent me a picture of my butt.
At least you have.
No, it was a little thing. Moving along, I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves briefly.
All right, I have to follow that. Hi, I'm Jennifer Russo. I am a small business and nonprofit attorney here in Key West and also on the editorial board of Key West Citizen.
Fantastic editorial yesterday, I might add.
Thank you, it was brilliant.
Who wrote it?
That would be you.
Brian Green. I am retired and have the inalienable skill of choosing to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I am therefore on the governing board of the hospital. And I'm chairman of HARC, just to
Hi, my name is Gwen Losa. I'm a reporter at the Florida Keys Keynoter, and I cover Key West, and we're also available at flkeysnews.com.
I'm Mark Stober. I'm a volunteer with the Last Stand Board of Directors here in town. My wife has a store on Whitehead Street, Impossible Things Beat Emporium, that she employs me part-time. Also part-time employee at the Community Foundation of the Florida Keys.
Thank you, everyone. And Gwen reminded me, our website, if you want to text somebody, it's hometownkey-west.com, and we are streaming. You go to the right side of the page, and if you would, ask them to verify that it's working. So we'll get right into it. I'm going to let the candidates introduce themselves and give a very short quip of why they're running, like 5 seconds. One sentence. I will give you the hook. So, Tom, take it off.
Tom Milone, I'm running for Group 2. This is a citywide race. It's nonpartisan. Everybody gets to vote. I'm retired. I've lived in Key West for 15 years. Currently serve on the Citizen Review.
It's not his fault. He's the first one. Peter, shorter.
I'm glad to be here.
What's your name?
My name is Peter Batty, and I'm running for Utility Board Group 2. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you very much. All right, Jennifer, first question for Utility Board.
Me. All right, this question will be for Peter. Do you support passage of the Florida Right to Solar Energy Choice Initiative, which is also known as Amendment 1 on the ballot this November, to amend the state constitution giving Florida residents the right to own or lease solar energy equipment for personal use, and then why or why not?
There are two constitutional amendments on the ballot. The first is going to be on August 30th, and that is Amendment 4. I support that wholeheartedly. What that does is it stops ad valorem taxes being assessed on solar equipment. If they were to be assessed on solar equipment, what that would do is that would increase the cost and therefore decrease the ability to put solar on your house or whatever other green means of generating or saving electricity. In terms of Amendment 1, I'm absolutely opposed to that. It was promulgated by for-profit utilities. It gives the ability to hamper the installation of solar and by capping the amount of money that can be returned to ratepayers. So I am absolutely opposed to Amendment 1, but totally in favor of Amendment 4.
Tom, I think this is your third run at the Utility Board. What is it that attracts you to want to sit on the board so much?
You asked me that after you were on the hospital.
No. To Tom.
I'm retired. I've been retired now for almost 16 years. And I have two goals for my retirement. One is to be physically active, and the other one is to be mentally active and to continue to be productive. I spent my entire adult life as a career in the public service, retired successfully 16 years ago. And when I moved here 15 years ago, I took an interest in local government. It's simply a continuation of a lifelong interest. I've served on a number of boards here and served on the Citizen Review Board at the present time. And I would wish to continue my public service for as long as I am physically and mentally able to do so.
Thank you, Tom. Go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Batty. According to the latest campaign finance report filings, you've raised almost $20,000 for this campaign and spent $409. And I noticed you have hat money. You have hats. I was just curious, I mean, are you funding your own campaign, or why haven't you raised all this money if you haven't spent any?
Well, first of all, I should say, and please don't take this from my 90 seconds, thank you so much for being here as a panel, and thank you to Hometown PAC and to the studios of Key West. Actually, I've raised $21,650. I filed an amended report today where I've spent about $15,000 or $16,000. Why have I raised so much money? Well, I haven't really gone out to raise it. A lot of people have called me. I believe that they believe that I've done a good job on Keys Energy Board. I have a lot of friends in this community. I believe that giving back to this community is the most important thing that we can do, and I think there are a lot of people who'd like to see me reelected, and I'm happy to accept their money. I'm happy to spend their money, and I think it's a delightful process, and even though I wanted to run unopposed again, I was not given that ability to do so, but it has been an amazing run and a chance for me to say hello to 1 million people that I know and love in this community. So I will spend 100% of that money.
Mark.
This question's for Tom. Currently, the cost of sustainable electricity generation is higher per kilowatt hour than gas, oil, and nuclear. Are you willing to have Keys customers pay more to acquire power from a renewable energy source?
Other communities are going with renewables, and they're managing to do it at a lower cost. An example being Georgetown, Texas. I recently read about them, and they're doing both solar and wind. So apparently it can be done at a lower cost. I don't know for certain what it's going to cost the people. I know where I feel we should be headed. I'm not sure exactly how we get there. I need a lot of technical advice. But you know, I'm aware of the need to keep rates affordable. I'm on fixed income, have been for 16 years, and if you know about inflation, you know where I stand. That's the best I could answer. I mean, I'm not going to guarantee no rate increases. I think I'd be irresponsible. I think I'd be, you know, irresponsible, but I'm certainly going to keep it as affordable as I possibly can.
This question is for Tom as well. Do you believe utility board members should be subjected to term limits for their service on the board? And if so, what do you think is an appropriate limit?
I have consistently opposed term limits. When I was sitting on the Charter and District Boundary Review Committee, which is created every 10 years after the census, I wanted to remove from the city charter. The committee didn't go along with me. I feel it's an impingement on the rights of the voters. I believe that the voters should determine how long somebody should be in office. Sometimes one term is one term too many. Sometimes it's after 2 or 3 terms. It should be left to the voters to decide.
This is for Peter Batty. At the July 25th hometown meeting, Tim Root said the new Keys Energy building didn't have solar panels because you couldn't justify the cost. If that's true, do you have any plans to help make this alternative energy source more attractive for the rest of us?
Well, I think that there was a lot of discussion. I'm not necessarily agreeing with what Tim said. How about that? Tim is an excellent board member, but the reason that we didn't put solar panels on that building is because we didn't seek LEED certification. LEED certification is a very, very interesting thing. It's also a very, very expensive thing. If you look at the new City Hall, the LEED certification is costing hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of dollars more. As an example, the lumber that was milled, they had to retruck from the mainland the sawdust back to be used on the site. Absolutely insane when you think of the cost of the fuel to retruck sawdust back to Key West. So I believe that LEED certification has its place. I don't believe it has its place on a utility that is trying to keep the rates as low as they possibly can. In terms of solar panels, we're contributing $240,000 to the city of Key West for their solar panels, and I might add, not for the carport, but for the solar panels. Absolutely important. I would rather that they were on the roof, but that's not my decision. The second thing I would like to say is, in terms of energy, the greenest kilowatt is the one that's not used. And that's where we need to focus. We need to keep our eye on solar, that will happen, but we need to cut consumption, and we can do it.
This is for either or both.
Take your pick.
Tom, the board members, they meet like twice a month, and for that they earn like almost 20 grand a year. The chairperson gets $23,400 a year. Their $50,000 life insurance policy, full paid health. It just sounds like a really sweet job. And is it a little bit overpaid, or do you think it's well worth the investment?
Can I answer that? Because
No. Tom can answer, you'll get the rebuttal.
It's a sweet political plum, and I've thought that for years. For $20,000, they get the same as a city commissioner, and they do far less work. If you attend a utility board meeting, they last maybe a half hour, 40 minutes. Staff does most of the talking. Board members just tend to just sit there and listen, make a few comments. Half hour, 40 minutes tops, and they're out the door. I don't think the salary is justified. As far as the health insurance, I don't need it. I have Medicare, and I have a supplement from my retirement.
Peter, I think you might want to rebut.
okay, two things. Number one, in terms of health insurance, I'm happy to use the Cigna program from Keys Energy as my secondary insurance, so that means most of it is paid by my Medicare, so Keys is only paying a very, very small fraction of that. In terms of the work that I do, I really would like to go for a meeting half an hour twice a month and be out of there. I conservatively spend perhaps 15 to 25 hours per week on Keys Energy. I'm always on the phone. If you don't believe that, just check with any of the employees. We work really, really hard. In addition to being on the utility board, we have other things.
Thank you. Good. Mark.
This question is for Peter. Keys has generous sick time and vacation time carryover policies for long-term employees. Health insurance for employees is covered at 100% of the premium cost for the employee-only coverage. Have you compared these benefits with employers in Monroe County, and are these benefits necessary to hire and maintain employees to deliver on Keys' mission?
Keys Energy has many assets. I believe that the greatest asset we have is our employee group. When I started with the utility 11 years ago, we had 162 employees. We're now down to 129 employees, and our service has absolutely gotten better. In order to protect the asset, you need to give them a living wage. We start employees at about $14 or $15 an hour. You can't attract qualified employees if you want to pay like the public sector does and pay them substandard wages. We can't retrain linemen, we can't hire linemen, so we give them really good benefits, we pay them good salaries, and we wish the rest of the community would do the same so that we would have people that could afford to live here and stay here on a long-term basis. We cannot afford to lose employees, and living in Key West, the most expensive place in Florida, we need to take good care of them, and believe me, we do, and I'm very proud of that.
Tom, 30 seconds to give your thoughts, and then we're going to have a 1-minute wrap-up from each of you.
On that question?
Yes.
I have absolutely no problem with the benefits that are afforded to Keys employees. They do very technical and dangerous work. I do believe in a generous sick leave policy. The newer employees can accumulate up to 130 days. I recall when I was working, a coworker had cancer, and she was out of work for a year. And when I retired, I had 6 months because I didn't abuse my sick time because I didn't know if something might happen. So I have no problem with a generous, with the benefits that are afforded by Keys Energy to their employees.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, Peter, 1 minute to wrap up.
As I mentioned, I've been on the board for 11 years, and I have not been asleep at the switch. I look at the things that we've accomplished and it has been absolutely remarkable. But I'm not so concerned about the past, I'm more concerned about the future. We have a tie line, which some of the wire on the tie line is 50 years old. It's going to take somewhere between $8 and $11 million to redo that project. Everything that we've done so far, we've done without increasing rates to the community. We really need to look into the future. We need to protect our employees. We need to harden our system. And after Hurricane Wilma, there were portions of the east coast of Florida who were without power for 6 and 8 weeks. The longest we've ever experienced is 7 to 8 days. We are a public utility. We serve you. We are going to go into the future as we have in the past. We are delighted to serve you. We are delighted to give you the best possible power at the lowest possible price with the greatest dependability. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Tom, 1 minute.
I spent my entire life in the public service, initially as a paid public employee, and then later on when I moved down here as a volunteer. And I wish to continue in the public service for as long as I'm able, for as long as the people will allow me to serve. I feel that the Keys Energy Board provides a very important public service. I'd like to be a part of that board. I'd like to be a part of Keys Energy. I think we're very fortunate to have the people that we do have at Keys Energy. We have diligent, dedicated career professionals, and they get good pay and good benefits, and I think there's very little turnover, which is what this community needs. And I'd like to have the opportunity to serve. I have a Facebook page, elect Tom Milone for Utility Board Group 2. You can find out more about me and about my platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, gentlemen. That's it. Thank you.
And thank you to the panel. Thank you so much.
If our judges could come up, or prospective judges. While they're coming up, you might notice our sound girl, a little less attractive depending on, what your opinion is, but we want to thank Miguel back there. I have been to a number of things that Miguel runs sound for, and this is by far the most tame one, I'm sure. At least so far tonight, we'll see. While Sheldon gives the briefing here. While Sheldon does the briefing, he would want me to say, if you haven't, please join Hometown. And we're having we really do thank you. We've had really great response, and people are joining, but I'm betting there's people here that haven't joined, so we'd like to see them. Getting right to it. Sharon, since you've got everybody's attention, would you introduce yourself and what you're doing here?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sharon Hamilton. I'm running for County Court Judge Group 3. This race is about experience, and I am the one who has the experience and who's quick with their hands to keep this in place. Thank you.
Rob?
I'm Rob Stober. I'm running for Judge. I'm running for Judge to continue my service to the community.
This is for Rob. Your opponent says 50% of the caseload heard by this judicial seat is criminal, and that she is the only one who has criminal trial experience. Do you believe your mainly civil case background places you at a disadvantage?
Absolutely not. Lawyers are not usually well known for their math skills, but it's pretty simple math to figure out that if half the cases are criminal, the other half are civil cases. I know we have a number of lawyers in the room here, but trials are conducted in the same manner, whether it's a civil trial or a criminal trial. The rules of evidence and procedure apply in both cases. I've tried cases in small claims court, county court, circuit court, federal court, and the law is not, or how a trial is conducted is not substantially different in a trial court in criminal than it is for civil court. So I don't think that I'm at a disadvantage at all.
Gwen?
Hi, so this is from Ms. Hamilton. Can you tell us about a case that you feel is like your most successful legal accomplishment in your career? I know you don't have a lot of time, but just something that you're super proud of that you can, just give us the highlights.
As a young lawyer in Marathon, I was approached to do a Pigeon Key Foundation case in Marathon, and I handled that case against a lot of, the whole county attorney's office at the time. And Judge Payne was the judge, and it was a 2-day long trial, and I was exhausted at the end, but I did come out victorious at the trial level, and I was very proud of that because all the other attorneys had so much more experience than I did.
May I answer that one as well?
No.
I wouldn't be a good lawyer or politician if I didn't ask for the opportunity.
But there are rules, and maybe one of these other ladies or gentlemen will ask along the way.
I am a rule follower.
So Rob, you get this question. While the United States has about 5% of the world's population, it's reported that 25% of the prison population are held here. Can you discuss examples of creative or alternative sentencing that may be appropriate to help relieve congestion or jail in our state prisons?
I think we should get Shad Neese up here to respond to that one. I think he has a whole platform built on that. It's actually, I don't think it's the greatest question to ask of a judge. Judges are constrained in how they can answer, and they need to answer that they're going to follow the law, they're going to listen to the facts. I'm going to pledge that I'm going to be respectful. Oddly enough, I'd like to tell you about a personal experience I had. I had a young man's family call me, and I knew the young man from the school system. He had been charged with a number of crimes. He'd made a number of bad decisions one night and aggravated it. And nobody would take his case in town. And while I'm not a criminal lawyer, the family knew me. And so I interceded on his behalf. And he'd been locked up for about 90 days. I undertook the case. I met with the prosecutors, and we were able to get him into a program. And he did a diversion program. I'm happy to say almost 3 years later, he's not been in trouble again. He has attended college, he has a job, he's contributing to society. So I think the important thing for the judge, and judges supervise alternative programs for offenders. I think the important thing for the judge is to understand the community, understand when somebody would benefit from one of these programs, and make the right choice for them at that time.
I would like both candidates to answer if possible this next question.
Which one first?
Let's start with Sharon. Okay. Of the current U.S. Supreme Court justices, which justice do you most admire and why?
That's a very interesting question. I can't say that I actually have just one, because they're all individuals, and all of their decisions that they have made throughout their career and their dedication, I've admired all of them for their commitment to the law, and I can't say that there's just one that I admire more than any of the others, honestly, because to serve the term, it's a life term, and to give that up for the commitment to the people and serving on the Supreme Court, I think is honorable for all of them. So I don't think I can pick just one. Although I think the first woman Supreme Court justice would be my favorite.
Would Ruth Bader Ginsburg be too easy to follow that with? The question that I had hoped for was, who was your favorite justice throughout history? And of course, I would have to
We get to write the questions.
Fair enough, but I get to answer them. So I would go with John Marshall, author of the Marbury versus Madison opinion, and he set forth really how the court was going to work heading forward from the 1801 forward. So he would be my favorite one. Maybe not the popular answer this evening, but I certainly respect all the women in the law. I think that I agree with Sharon. The Supreme Court is an incredible institution that we have, and it would be an incredible opportunity to serve with the recent opening that we've had. Although I've been seeking this position, I've been waiting for Washington to call me for the appointment to that position.
All right, from another lawyer, those were two non-responsive answers.
At least it was for both of us.
This is for Sharon. Do you support alternatives to incarceration for offences linked to addiction, such as drug use?
Working within the court system for almost 28 years, especially in the last 10, working in the actual court administration and magistrating, I have covered drug court for the judges, and I think drug court is an excellent program, diversion program to help the people that do have addictions. I also think that a mental health court and a veterans court would be very helpful in this community to help people with addictions and mental health problems, to keep them out of the cycle of criminal cases, ongoing. And so I do absolutely believe wholeheartedly in diversion programs that help people that have issues that need to be helped with.
So for Mr. Stober?
You can call me Rob, everyone else does.
I was just looking at your website, and you talk a lot about your experience as a staff counsel for Geico. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then you've been in a firm for the past 13 years. But am I missing something? Have you ever worked as a prosecutor or in that capacity, or do you think that's important to kind of know how that part works?
Let's get this straight. I have never worked as a prosecutor. When I graduated from the University of Miami, I went with the best opportunity that I had, which was working for an admiralty and maritime law firm. And then I had an even better opportunity to go to Geico. And for me, it was an incredible experience because there's only a couple institutions that allow young lawyers to try cases. Obviously, the state attorney is one of them, the public defender is another, the federal government. But insurance companies have the wherewithal to try cases. It's very expensive to try cases. And so as a young attorney, the first week I was in the office, my managing attorney came down and said, Rob, hey, go try this case next week. It's only $100,000. Don't worry about that. And in private practice, I know there's a number of attorneys, and maybe I do a lot of nonprofit work as well, but it's typically too expensive for individuals to try cases. And to send somebody a bill for $10,000 worth of legal work, it's very upsetting that they need to spend so much to have their day in court. But the justice system that we have now, only the very poor and the very rich have access to it. So I understand that.
Sort of like healthcare.
I don't think I can comment on that.
This question's for Sharon, please. Can you share thoughts on jury management procedures you will implement to guarantee a proper pool of potential jurors while minimizing the disruption to community members selected for jury service?
That's a very good question, because part of this position is to direct the clerk on summoning the jury for the jury pool, the number of jurors, and that depends on how many trials. When you have, for instance, in a criminal case, you have what's called docket sounding. And all those cases, let's say you have 100 cases that come before the judge at docket sounding, they all have to announce whether they want a continuance or whether they want to go to trial. So you may have 10 people who say, all right, I want 10 trials. Then the other judge, which would be Judge Garcia in this particular case, may also have jury trials that they need to summons juries for. The biggest problem is that what you have is all the people that say, I'm announcing ready for trial. So you have 10 criminal cases announcing ready for trial, and you might have 2 civil cases announcing ready for trial. The odds of those 2 civil cases going to trial are not very high. They usually settle before they actually go to a jury trial. Part of because what Rob says is correct. It is expensive, and usually that's what happens. 30 seconds. So the bottom line is it's difficult to say, because you have to pick so many more jurors, because a lot of jurors do not show up to pick that jury veneer. So I think the most important thing is to make sure you schedule your docket sounding and then have a plea date before you summons those jurors, so that if you have those 10 cases, for instance in criminal, that say, I'm announcing ready for trial, make sure you have a plea date before you have to summons those jurors, because they may plea and then you don't have to disrupt the jurors' time.
Jennifer, last question.
Rob, do you believe that mandatory sentences for nonviolent drug offenses disproportionately affects our minority communities? And if so, what changes do you think need to be made to the mandatory sentencing statutes to correct these problems?
I think that that is, again, an unfair question, and I hate to say it to you again, Jennifer, because I have great respect for you and the whole panel here. Whatever the law is, I'm going to follow it. I'm going to listen to the facts. I'm going to listen to the evidence. I'm going to use my good judgment. And even if it disagrees with my personal opinion, I'm going to follow the law. And so when there's a mandatory, I don't think that that's within the judge's discretion not to follow.
No, I wasn't asking that. I'm just saying that as a philosophical, and you're obviously going to be a judge and you're going to be handling criminal law cases. Just asking if you think that in society in general, if it has a negative impact on minority communities.
And again, I would defer to the other politicians to lobby in Tallahassee to get the law changed. The judge's job is not to change the law. The judge's law is to enforce the law. And so I welcome any other question, but I don't think I can give you the answer you want on that.
Well, with that, we're going to wrap up. We have a little bit, you get 90 seconds for your closing. I know it's a whole 30 seconds extra, but you take what you can get. But Sharon, why don't you lead us off, and then Rob will close. 90 seconds.
Good evening. I have two questions for you that need to be answered. One is, how does this position affect you if you don't live in the Plantation Key Division, and why should you vote for me? This seat absolutely affects each and every one of you here and each and every one of you watching on YouTube. How? Because the person who fills this seat after Judge Tomey retires from 30 years of judicial service will have the duty judge assignment for 1 week at least every 8 weeks. What does that entail? That entails first appearances, criminal first appearances for every single person arrested in Monroe County. That entails juvenile delinquency detention hearings. That entails dependency shelter hearings. That entails domestic violence injunctions and warrants. You don't have to be an attorney. You don't have to be a plaintiff or defendant. You can be a victim or a witness. Who do you want setting that bond on that criminal defendant? Who do you want determining whether or not that child goes to secure detention in Miami, or whether that child with allegations of abuse, abandonment, or neglect gets returned home, whether that warrant gets issued, and what are the parameters of the domestic violence injunction? I am the candidate who has experience in every single area of law that I just described. I am the candidate who can hit the ground running immediately upon the election. I have shown you my experience, my integrity, and my compassion. So please vote Hamilton on August 30th. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to us tonight. I have over 20 years of experience in helping people resolve their problems. Understanding the law is important, but temperament, wisdom, and an understanding of the community are critical. The judge is a leader and pillar for the community. My experience as a leader in the chamber, Rotary, Take Stock in Children, justice teaching, has taught me that the right decision isn't always the most popular one, and it's going to take courage to be the judge. I'm the only candidate ranked by Martindale as distinguished and given a high ethical rating. I'd like you to get to know more about me, but tonight isn't there's just not enough time to do it, and sorry, Jennifer, some of the questions I didn't think a judge should be answering. Again, we're constrained by the rules. I'm going to stick around tonight. You can also look on my website, robstober.com. I posted my resume. You can look at all my experiences, Gwen did. You can also look on our Facebook page or just give me a call. I would be happy to talk to you. I'm running for judge to continue my service to the community. I'm Rob Stober, and I'm asking for your vote on August 30th. Thanks.
Kevin Diaz and Daniel Horton, come up. While we're switching people out, I'm going to note something. I think it's the first time that we've ever had a computer at the podium up there. It's kind of neat that she can fact check, do whatever she needs to right there. So at least you did get the paper you were right, so that was important. We're trying to keep things moving because we got a lot of stuff tonight, and it should be very interesting through the whole evening. All right, guys. Sheldon has done his briefing. Kevin, want to introduce yourself and very quickly.
Quick intro.
My name is Kevin Diaz. I'm running for state representative for District 120. And I'm running because we need somebody representing us in Tallahassee and not special interests and fighting for the community, and I'm a product of this community.
Hello everyone, Dan Horton running for State House District 120. I'm a proud Democrat. I'm the son of a teacher, the brother of an active duty Navy man, former president of the student body of law, and I'm here to help.
Thank you guys. Gwen's gonna have the first question. Just in case you didn't know and I didn't put it out there, these gentlemen are running against each other to run against the Republican, Holly RASCHEIN, who is the incumbent. So, go ahead, Gwen.
Hi, guys. Okay, so you're both Democrats, and in Florida, if you were to win as a minority party member, unlikely to change anytime soon, I mean, how would you get anything passed, given Key's incessant need for state money for bridges, land acquisition, et cetera? I mean, how would you, what do people say, work across the aisle? I mean, how would you get anything done?
Well, I think it starts with applying conservative philosophies to push progressive ideology. I think that's the way you push agenda in Tallahassee. So for example, for renewable energy, the private sector is a real big strong point for the conservative movement. They believe in the private sector. So why not open up the power grid? Why not allow competition in the power grid? It seems logical if you take a conservative point of view. So that's how I would approach it, is just apply their principles to achieve our goals.
One little quick, talk either to the camera or to all of them. Don't worry about it.
Sorry about that.
Okay, this is a question for Dan. There is toxic algae in St. Lucie Estuary, tritium in Biscayne Bay National Park, saltwater plumes threatening drinking water aquifers, and seagrass die-off in Florida Bay. What specific legislative solutions do you believe need to pass to address these critical issues?
A lot. One of the most important things is restoring the flow from Lake Okeechobee down to the Florida Bay. Okay, so all the algae is created by a lot of fertilization in the water. It's created by pollutants that the citizens of the state of Florida have demanded that polluters pay for. We passed a constitutional amendment to the state constitution that said, listen, if you're going to pollute our waters, you got to pay for it. However, because we have an overwhelming majority of Republicans in both the state house and the state senate and in the governorship, what happens is we allow big business to choose which regulations we're going to enforce. So when we say we're going to make the polluters pay, we have representatives in Tallahassee that say, oh, well, they're going to pay, but we're not going to make them pay much, or we're not going to make them pay often, right? So we have to start enforcing the regulations that we have already. We have to start actually funding Florida forever. We have to restore the flow, get the water down to the Florida Bay, refresh that fresh water that supplies the seagrass, and that's what we got to do.
Last question I want you to.
This question will be for Kevin. One of the reasons for the high cost of homeowners insurance in the Keys is the fact that we only have 2 standard insurance carriers willing to issue such policies on existing structures. If elected, will you take any specific action to increase competition in the market to help drive down the cost of homeowners insurance?
Absolutely, and those are one of my big threes as far as what I want to do in Tallahassee. And the big three, one of the big three, is allowing local municipalities to self-insure for homeowners insurance. It's time to let Monroe and the people of Monroe self-insure. And the reason why we need that is because Tallahassee can't solve the problems and the private sector isn't solving the problem. So what we should be doing is creating our own fund, which should be capitalized over a certain amount of time, and we provide reinsurance to that fund. I see that as a long-term solution, and the more I talk to people, the more support that is getting. I think that's the true direction Monroe County needs to head into.
This is one of the most difficult races for me as a voter, because I sit there looking at the literature from the pair of you. You're both lawyers, you're both from Miami, you're both Democrats, and except for chasing Pokemon, it's difficult for me to see differentiate you from each other. Could you briefly tell me why I should vote for one rather than the other of you?
Well, I'll tell you, my background, and I talk about this all the time, one of the things that drives me is my background. I grew up in a really poor family. I've been working since I was 14. Growing up, the food that I ate came from food bank at our local church. The clothes that I wore were hand-me-downs from my neighbors. I say that almost every single stump speech. But the reason I say that is because it communicates to you what drives me. What makes me want to represent this community? Because people in Monroe County are struggling. The HUD numbers, and I won't go too far into this, but we are cost burning. Our cost of living is insane. Homeowners, almost 45% of you in this room that are homeowners are cost burden. You pay way too much of your expenses every month in paying for rent and your living expenses. If you're renting, it's over 50%. We don't have money in our communities that we need to live. We have to increase it, and I know what it's like to struggle. I've been doing it my whole life, and that's what really drives me. So I don't talk a lot about huge policies that I want to get into action, because the reality is I would be one of 120 different state representatives, right, working with a Republican legislature. But the most important thing to me is that you know where my heart is, and that you know that I care about people, and you know that every time I deal with legislation, that's what's going to drive me.
Well, let me first say that I'm the only attorney. I think Dan, he is not a licensed attorney, so that's first. I'm a product of this community. I'm running because this is my community. I want to fight for everyone here. I'm the only one with a platform and an agenda. And I've been clear all along, this is not about a statement. This is not about making political statements. This is about helping our community. And that's why I'm running, and that's why I put on a platform, and that's why I'm pushing that platform every door that I knock on. I've knocked on over 3,500 doors, and I can tell you right now, the people are getting behind it. And the reason they're getting behind it is because we need somebody fighting for us. We need a local community person fighting for us, someone we can trust. And I'm that person. And no one's asked me to run, no one has dictated the terms to me. I chose to run because this is my hometown, and I'm willing to fight whatever fight it needs to be done in order to get these things done for all of you in Tallahassee.
Can I ask both or just one? How does this work?
If it's both, unless it's a really open question, ask a question of one, and then the other can have a 30-second rebuttal. Otherwise, we're not going to move along.
Okay, I'm going to try to remember that. Sorry, everybody. Okay, so I guess for both, is Florida, is the state doing enough to respond to the, I guess, threat of the Zika virus? I mean, our governor was in town recently, and he said that it was the feds who needed to step up, and of course. And but I'm just wondering, I mean, what do you think? I mean, is there enough being done? Is it too alarmist to even ask that question? Or,
I don't think that it's alarmist at all. I don't know that enough is being done at this moment, but I think that we're trying. I think that in the state legislature, Rick Scott cut our funding for mosquito control by 40%. And when you do that, this is the situation you end up with. When you don't have the funding to take care of the problems, you end up with people freaking out, and it's warranted. It's a scary situation. We've got to keep working towards it, but I believe that we are going to work together and find a solution.
I see it as what's happening is it's just becoming politicized, like most of our issues. Political parties stick to their sides and nothing gets done, and everybody points the finger. So what needs to happen is people actually take reasonable approaches. People stop going to the news media and blaming either the president or the governor and just saying this is what needs to be done and this is what we're going to do and we're going to get it done, and it doesn't matter who gets the blame or the benefit. And that's what I see as the problem, is finger pointing.
Thank you, guys. A little tip, while the candidates can be as political as they want, we'd like our questioners to not make political statements. Mark?
This is a question for Kevin. On your website, you give us some ideas about desalination as an economic and environmental boost for the Florida Keys. What is the size of a desalination operation that is necessary to help us with stormwater flooding and sea level rise? And where would this facility be located, and how would the investment be funded?
Well, just to give you a little bit of background, right now we have what's called a brackish water desalination plant in Florida City. It's when the aquifer is too low for us to get our water from the mainland. So we need to convert that to a full seawater desalination. That's one of my platforms. The money needs to come from multiple forms. One, obviously, the government has to be the biggest provider, state and local, and hopefully federal, because it's a long-term issue for our community. But I also see the private sector being a big help in this avenue as well. if we do design the plant in a way, in a manner that is desalinating enough water to cover Monroe County, that means we have excess water. That means we can sell off that water and or sell off the rights to that plant. So I see it as a private sector solution and a governmental solution. Obviously, dealing with many conservatives who don't feel the environment is a big deal, it's going to be a challenge. That will probably be the biggest challenge in Tallahassee because the private sector solution is nominal compared to the governmental force that needs to be behind it.
I would like both of them to answer this because it's a short question, but would you support state legislation to allow Uber to operate throughout the state without local government interference? And if so, will you take action or support legislation on your own, co-sponsor any such legislation?
I do support Uber. I can tell you that Uber solves a problem for a lot of really low-income families. There are a lot of low-income families that the last mile in transit is always the hardest part. It's always the hardest part to figure out that mile to get to your public transportation system and that last mile getting home from it. And Uber fills one of those gaps that a lot of poor families really need. You know, it's single moms with their kids. Instead of having to wait for a bus or having to wait for a taxi cab that might be a little more expensive, they're able to spend a couple bucks and get home to their kids. And I think it solves the problem. I do support Uber.
I do support Uber as well. I do think, however, that it's more likely going to stay as a local issue. I would co-sponsor legislation on that issue, but I don't see it as the real paramount concerns we need to fight. And if the local government can handle it, great, but I'd rather tackle the major issues in Tallahassee, the environmental concerns, the wastewater conversion, the seawater conversion. I want to tackle the big issues because that's what's affecting us every day.
This is for Kevin. What proposals do you have to increase the supply of affordable homes in the Keys?
That's probably one of the biggest issues down here, I think, is affordable housing. And I actually wrote a piece on the Florida Blue paper concerning the current legislation that's out there. And what's most important is the definition of affordable housing. What we have right now on particular funds, it says it's 160% above the household median income. That means it's almost $100,000 a year that you're making. That's over $2,100 a month. I don't see that as affordable. I don't know about everybody else. I'm a practicing attorney in Miami and I can't afford that. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. So it starts with redefining what exactly affordable housing is. And that has to come from Tallahassee. That can't come from the local government because they're not doing a good enough job at it. Developers are monopolizing our communities. I see it firsthand in the Redlands and Homestead. Developers are taking over our farmlands. And what we have in Key West is the same thing. So it starts with redefining what affordable housing is, and it has to come from Tallahassee. And right now what we have is not that. On the lowest end you see from 60 to 140% as a definition. That is very expensive.
If I may, I would love to jump in on this one. Brian, that's up to you. Okay, 30 seconds.
Perfect. So I think that one of the big things that people forget about affordable housing is a two-part solution, right? You have low wages on one side, and then you have obscene prices of housing. So not only do we have to bring the cost of housing down, we have to bring wages up. We have to work our way to the middle. That's what cost burden is. You don't have the money to spend. If we're able to increase the money that our families have in this community, then we're able to also work our way towards the middle with affordable housing and come up with a solution that we can actually work.
Thank you. All right, we've got a little bit of time, so we're going to do our speed round here. So give me questions that can be answered quickly. Gwen, you start. From one person. You don't get no rebuttals.
Try to be non-political, whatever. I just want to say I wasn't being political. I think there was some misunderstanding going on.
Moving along.
No, I need to have a moment. You're both very immersed in Miami. Is this even a key seat anymore? I mean, would you set up an office down here, or how do you balance like being down here and taking care of the Keys, but also?
I see this as a key seat. It's absolutely a key seat. And that's why so many people come down here, because without the Florida Keys, you can't win this seat. And since I'm from Homestead and the farmlands, what my plan would be is to move the Homestead office into Monroe County, so Monroe County would have two offices, and I would be living in the day portion. So I think that would be the fair thing to do.
just real quick for Dan, you support the $15 minimum wage. What do you say to the economists who feel that it's going to hurt small businesses and reduce total employment?
Well, I think if you look at the federal minimum wage, there have always been exceptions. There have always been ways to make it a slower transition to a $15 minimum wage. I think it's absolutely necessary. I think we have to get there quick, but I think that we can work towards that in pieces. We can work our way there. We don't have to go directly to a $15 minimum wage immediately. We should. The minimum wage, according to inflation, should be somewhere around $23 at the national level. But I think that we can work our way there. And what I would say to the small business owners is that people in the poor and middle class spend 106% of their income. They spend more than they make. So if you put money into our neighborhoods and into our communities, they're going to bring it to your small business. They're going to keep that in the communities, and they're not putting it in offshore tax havens.
All right, this will be for Kevin. Do you support the state's purchase of Big Sugar land south of Lake Okeechobee?
Absolutely. I think the state should be buying up more environmental land instead of selling it off to private developers or private businesses. I think that's one of the biggest issues we're facing right now is more environmental land being sold, more developers building, more people, more pollution, and it's only growing, and that's probably one of the biggest fights we'll have in Tallahassee, and that's one of the most unfair fights we'll have because the conservative movement is not in favor of helping any type of environmental protection.
This is for Dan. How would you reduce our dependency on fossil fuel? Would you, for example, support an energy from waste facility in the Keys?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that one more time?
Sorry, it's a British accent.
I understand your pain.
How would you reduce our dependency on fossil fuel? Would you support an energy from waste facility in the Keys?
Energy from waste? I'll be honest with you, I'm not really familiar with energy from waste. I think that utilizing solar energy is one of the biggest, or the lack of use of solar energy in Florida is one of the biggest mistakes that we've made. So I support solar, I support alternative energy. I'm not really familiar with the waste energy, though. I apologize.
Thank you, guys. Now, 1 minute to close. Daniel, you start.
Okay. So as I was preparing to come tonight, I broke something, and I carry it with me all the time. Since the first time I came to Key West, I got my little One Human Family bracelet, and I've worn it with me every single day going and knocking on neighborhoods. And there's a reason, because this signifies to me the type of community that you have created in Key West that should serve as an example to the rest of the Keys and to the rest of the state of Florida. The community that you created is something that I grew up with in my family. Something where you could rely on your neighbor to help you out when you needed it. I grew up in a family where, Christmas presents, they just appeared the night before Christmas because the people of our community knew that we couldn't afford them. I grew up in a place where we would come home from church and our kitchen would be full of groceries because the people of our community knew we couldn't afford them. You guys have that sense of community down here, and that's why I'm proud to fight to represent you. And this always reminds me, so if anyone has an extra bracelet, I'd love to have one. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. I'm running because this is my community. This is my hometown district. I'm a product of this district. And I already have a trend of fighting and standing up for people that try to dictate how things should be done in our district. The party has asked me to step aside, and I've said no every time. And I've said the reason is because this is personal to me. This is a fight that I want to take, not because I want a career in politics, not because someone's asked me to run, but because I live here. Because I have to see everyone every single day and have to explain to them why things are so bad, why things continue to get so bad. So for me, this is very personal. And not only do I have the platform to fight our issues, but I have the record and the educational background, the professional background to get it done. And I'm excited about the opportunity, and I hope everyone can support me in August and November. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a great night. Thanks for coming down. Next up is School Board. Ed Davidson and Mindy Conn, come on up. Now, we mentioned about that we're streaming, but we didn't thank FloridaKeys.com. They do a great job for us. And last time they had the YouTube video up, I think the next day. So they get really quick on that. But we do pay them, so we need money to do that. When have you recovered over there?
Just that little quib about the governor, I need to keep that up.
See, I'm off her Christmas list. You can see her computer, she's texting me and saying really nasty things. All right, here we go, guys. Okay, this is for School District 3, well, Monroe County School Board District 3. I'll let you guys introduce. Mindy, introduce yourself.
Hello everyone, my name is Mindy Conn. I'm running for School Board District 3, and I just want to say hello and thank you to Hometown, Todd, Jennifer, Brian, Gwen, Mark, and everybody who came tonight to hear what we have to say. Thank you.
I'm Captain Ed Davidson. I've been your taxpayer watchdog on the school board for the last 4 years. There's a lot more watchdogging that needs to be done. This is a $206 million a year budget. This is a very big business, and we raise 90% of it from local taxes because of our real estate values.
All right, Mark, you're first.
Okay, this is for Mindy. What do you say to the parents of a child where the school rating has just slipped down a notch about what the school board will do to change the situation?
So the first thing that it's important to remember is that school grading, the way that we decide that keeps changing, and as it changes, it becomes more difficult. Our teachers are doing a really good job, but right now the state is determining our school grades based upon the lowest quartile, which means that our students that are second language is English, our students that struggle in school with learning disabilities, those are the kids that we're being graded on. I say we do have to do a better job at reaching those students, but our schools are doing a good job, our teachers are doing a good job, and it's just a question of some improvement.
Jennifer.
This one will be for Captain Ed. As you just said, you've declared yourself the taxpayer watchdog candidate. However, this past year, taxpayers again fell victim to an embezzlement scandal at the school, in the school district with the HOB daycare program. This time it happened on your watch as a board member. However, no one was indicted, no one was fired, and very little punishment was rendered. And you voted against hiring an independent auditor to help find the missing funds. So do you think that you have been inconsistent in your words and your actions on the board?
Not at all, because the people they're trying to hire were the same two guys that talked us out of holding a whole bunch of people accountable in the Acevedo regime. It was the same lawyer with whom I met personally, by the way, while this discussion was, and we did a better job with the state's attorney and our own 3 attorneys on the school board. The reason that happened is because the principal wasn't doing his job, and the superintendent covered it up for 9 months. The district senior people knew about that theft in January. They covered it up from the school board, except for the then sitting chairman, who found a little bit about it and told the superintendent twice to go to the state's attorney, and the superintendent did not, because he was covering for the principal from a well-known local political family.
This is for Mindy. The average graduation rate for students who get to university further education is running at less than 60%. Do you think we should be doing more to identify and help students who might be happier and more successful in trade training rather than trying to send them all off to further education?
I definitely believe that career education is an important thing that we need to start improving upon in our school district. We do have lots of good programs for our high flyers that are looking to go to college. We are not doing enough for those students who wish to go straight to a career. I would like to start a program, an internship/apprentice program, where our students can take their 3 electives they have per day and be paired with a small business person. We have so many of those in our community, whether it's electric, plumbing, marine engines, it's endless. Let's give those kids an opportunity to do something that they're interested in, and therefore help our graduation rates and help our dropout rates, because I think they work harder in their core classes if they were moving towards something that they're really interested in doing.
This one's for Mr. Davidson. Hey, Ed. On your, the information you put on your candidate page on the Supervisor of Elections website, it's very, very long, and it talks about holding, quote, holding bubbas and bureaucrats accountable. Then it talks about the, quote, Bubba beneficiaries. Can you define Bubba for me? Who are these beneficiaries named Bubba?
How long have you been in town?
People define that word very differently. You've talked a lot about locals in Key West, Conks.
There's lots of good people in Key West. There's lots of great people in Key West. But there is a remnant subculture which is tolerant of a great deal more misbehavior in the public domain than they ought to be, and that people are in most other places. That's kind of colorful when you first start to deal with it, but these are public tax dollars. These are 90% of which comes from the pockets of the people in this room, and it gets less colorful the more often it happens. It shouldn't be tolerated, and the incident we just spoke about with the missing money and the cover-up to protect the political reputation shouldn't be tolerated, which is why I, in fact, threatened to move to fire the superintendent if he didn't finally hold somebody accountable. So then what did? We transferred the principal out of the school and created a $128,000 a year job for a program that has collapsed and failed, alternative education, that doesn't basically exist and has 33 students technically assigned to it. That's not accountability either.
Can I respond?
wasn't done.
Mark. This is one for Ed, please. What is the most important thing that the school board can do to help retain teachers beyond the first year?
That's the really fundamental question. We had 15 new teachers last year, starry-eyed, motivated, idealistic young teachers, and 14 of them left because they already figured out in a year that they couldn't afford to stay here and buy a house and raise a family. We simply need to pay teachers better. We also need to do our part in the community to contribute toward affordable workforce housing. The school board unanimously nominated me to sit on the Affordable Housing Board for the county. We had 6-hour meetings for a year. We just delivered our report. The only way you can build affordable housing is if you have public land. There is no way economically to build on privately owned land except to build condos for rich people. The school board has a number of properties. A couple of our public agencies do also. The Trumbull Point headquarters here, you can put like 150 units on there, depending how you mix it and so forth. We have the Marathon Manor in Marathon. We need to do our part. At the last meeting, and in fact, I got the board to all agree that the chief goal for those two properties is no longer to sell them to developers, but that they all agreed that we should contribute those properties toward affordable workforce housing for teachers, sheriff's deputies, emergency medical personnel, the really essential people in our society. It's the only way we're going to keep people here.
So we're going to respond now.
It's up to you. 30 seconds.
Thank you. So yes, we do have to do more. We've had 4 years of doing nothing, and I would like to be elected to the school board in order to get things started. Thank you.
All right, Mindy, I know you want to talk about this, so I'll let you have at it. Do you agree with the district's decision to create a new position for Mike Enriquez, or do you think that Mr. Enriquez should have been fired considering his role in both of the embezzlement scandals that have rocked the district?
So I hate picking on people that are in our employment. If they felt he should have been let go, then that's what should have happened. Instead, they decided to put him in alternative ed. Alternative ed is a very, very important program, and actually we're not doing enough for our alternative ed students. Whether it's 5 kids or 33 kids, they shouldn't be on our high school properties. They should have somebody in charge of their learning and making sure that they're doing what they need to do to get back in our schools, learning and doing what they should be doing. Mike Enriquez may be a very good person to get this done, Like anybody else, we have to give him a chance and see what he does with the program.
This is for Captain Ed. This is one that puzzles me quite a lot. With a board-appointed superintendent, please define the role of the school board.
The school board is first of all responsible for every nickel of your tax dollar. The administration and superintendent don't own any money. The school board is supposed to manage the money and oversee and be sure that it is well and carefully spent and transparently accounted for, which this district hasn't been all that good at over the years. The policy level implications aren't just the stuff that's in the policy manual. A lot of operational decisions have policy level impacts. And I've insisted repeatedly that the board needed to take that responsibility. Problem is, historically, the board, I was the first one elected to supervise and appointed superintendent. Three of the other people on the board got elected when the superintendent was also elected and was independent and could tell them to go pound sand, which often happened. I was the first one, and I had some interesting discussions during my term to try and point out to those guys that they were supposed to exercise more authority over the superintendent. They were used to letting them have a lot more laissez-faire opportunity to do pretty much as they pleased and not be as accountable as I've always believed and said they should be.
This is actually for both, but it's pretty straightforward. Captain Ed first. Should Mark Porter, who's the superintendent, do you want him to stay or go?
Mr. Porter has unfortunately inflicted upon himself a great deal of damage to his integrity and what we expected of him in the beginning. Originally, I championed him. He had the capabilities, but he made repeated choices to compromise with some other sorts of factors in the community that produced unfortunate and embarrassing results for everybody. That's happened so many times that I think that he's no longer the person we need to lead us into the future. As everybody knows, he's been looking for other jobs, and that is a very specific violation of his contract, a copy of which I have on the table here. He's not allowed to use us as a safety net while he looks for greener pastures and a better paycheck. He's obligated to us. He's violated that contract. And he's perfectly willing to leave over the holidays. Both of the jobs that we believe he's applied for, he would have to leave over the holidays in the middle of the school year. And that doesn't persuade me that he cares as much as he should about the kids in the community and the district operation.
Mindy, 30 seconds.
So as far as Mark Porter goes, he's done a lot of things right. He has made mistakes. As long as one or two individuals on the school board continue to put him down and not be willing to work with him in any way or matter, it's very hard for him to do his job. I believe that instead of being an acrimonious relationship, it needs to be a better working relationship. In doing so, I believe he would not have looked for other employment. And if you're that unhappy with him, you should have let him go.
This will be a quick one for Mindy. Please describe the experience that you have which will help you fulfill the board's role in union contract negotiations.
So actually, that's an interesting question, because for the first time, I sat in on some collective bargaining sessions with the school district, got a good idea of what's going on. And when I asked the question as to whether another school board member had done that, it hadn't happened. I feel like I have now a good idea of how that works, although the superintendent is actually tasked with that job. So I feel like I do now have a good understanding of collective bargaining, but ultimately we need to choose a superintendent that's going to make that work with our teachers.
Do I get to talk about that or not?
No, not unless they...
Okay.
This question will be for Mindy. Do you support drug testing in our schools, and if so, under which specific circumstances?
I do support drug testing in our schools. I have a son going into 9th grade. He plays lots of sports, and if he gets called to be drug tested, I am comfortable with that. There are some issues that need to be taken care of. We need absolute parameters. We can't take kids off campus. It does need to happen in the school. We need to assure that it's random, and we need to let people know what the specific drugs being tested for are.
Can I just follow up? Are you suggesting just for athletes, or do you believe that other extracurricular activities should be included?
I think that we should include all activities, not just athletes. However, we have a limited budget for that. We have to start somewhere. And we're not allowed to randomly test students not in extracurricular programs. So it does actually have to be limited by law to students in extracurricular activities, whether that's chess club, choir going off campus, or students in sports. I specifically use sports simply because my son would be one of the kids that could be randomly drug tested.
This is for Captain Ed. This year, out of Monroe's 16 schools, only 8 received an A grade, and 5 of those were charter schools. What action are you taking to make sure our public schools catch up with the charter schools?
I've said from the beginning, we should have real community-anchored, neighborhood-based, school-based management. We used to have it, and a series of superintendents have centralized control. To a serious degree, they use the phrase school-based management as lip service when it's convenient, but that's not how this district operates. It needs to be a level playing field, though, to begin with, because the charter schools have a great deal of latitude. They're not subject to a great deal of a degree of supervision. A lot of requirements are waived. It's not a level playing field at all. But I've also said it, I've said it many times and I'll say it again, if we had gone to the community and explained to them what we're doing and why we thought it was best for the kids and invited community input in neighborhood-based schools, why the hell do we care what some bureaucrat in Tallahassee or Washington thinks about whether we're 12th or 14th or whether we're A or B? If we're confident we're preparing our kids to have productive, interesting lives, we shouldn't accept that burden. This is all based on tests. I did my graduate work in psychometrics and testing. Okay? The best test in the world is a limited measure of limited things at a brief moment in one day in a kid's life. It measures maybe 15 or 20% of what our dedicated teachers do for kids. And then we allow bureaucrats to universalize that. And it's wrong.
When Leslie.
Thank you for both.
Ken, but Ed's got to go first.
Okay. I'm just going to ask this because I hear this talked about a lot. To be an effective member of a school board, is it an asset to have raised children, not just children that go to this school, but any children, or is it a non-issue? Because I hear people talk about that. I mean, is that, I think I was clear, like, is it an asset? Is it an experience that makes you a better school board member, or is it, I have a dog.
Ed, that's for you.
Real simple. All the other members of the school board, and many of them in the past, have kids or grandkids in the schools. They have wives and daughters as teachers. That represents only 1/5 of our taxpayer population. Everybody else on the board has fulfilled that. I particularly concentrate on the 80% of our taxpayer base, because it's expensive to live here. You have had to make money somewhere to come down here. You tend to be an older demographic. 80% of our taxpayers do not have kids in the schools and don't benefit directly. They're willing to fund the education of the next generation, but they expect their money to be well and carefully spent and transparently accounted for. And I spend a great deal of time doing it. This is a very big business. $206 million budget this year. The 4-year term, over $800 million worth of your money. And it has not always been spent as transparently as it should have been. And that's what I particularly concentrate on, the 80% of people who don't have kids in the schools and don't benefit directly. And I think you need some of that on the board, because the other 80% of the board represents only 20% of the taxpayer.
So I'm not sure he answered the question, but I'm going to. And I believe it is an asset to have my children as students in the school district. When the school board sits and discusses how NIMSY is doing, how many AP classes our kids are taking, who got pushed forward in math and who didn't, I have actual experience with my children in each of those areas. It gives me a whole different view of what's actually going on inside our schools, and it's a view that's necessary. So yes, I do believe that having children currently in our schools, and mine have come up from pre-K and kindergarten to 9th and 12th grade, is absolutely an asset to the school board.
All right, guys, that's the end of the questions. You have 1 minute to give a closing statement. We'll start with Ed, and then Mindy, you'll be next.
This is a very big business, like I said. It's a full-time job, and I treat it that way. Very often, if you watch any of the meetings, it turns out that I'm the only guy that read all of the support materials. And a lot of times I found things that nobody else did. When I bring those up, the fact is that the majority of the school board eventually responds and supportive and takes the appropriate action. They just didn't spend the time that I do digging those things out. That's what I do for particularly the 80% of you that are paying the bills and expect your money to be well spent and expect people to do that responsibly.
So I want to say thank you again. I'd like to start by saying we are not an 80% community, we are a 100% community. I intend to represent everyone, not just the taxpayers without kids in the schools, but the taxpayers with kids in the schools as well. I am an attorney. That is how I started my career. I read tons and tons of material. I do it well and I do it quickly, and I am also very capable of doing so. I too care about our 80%. Every taxpayer plays an important part in our school district and community, and I would just like to say that here up on the dais you have two people. You have somebody who represents the past and what's happened previously, and you have somebody who represents the future. Please vote for me, Mindy Conn, School Board District 3, for a good future for our community and our students. Thank you.
Thank you both. Next up will be the Clerk of the Circuit Court and Comptroller. Amy Heavilin is the incumbent, and Kevin Madok, will you both come on up? Once again, we had a lot of great food from Fausto's that wasn't free. So, actually, if you join Hometown, you can think about it, you can amortize your dinner over like a whole year.
Yeah.
Or if everybody either take a seat or clear out. All right, here we go. Amy, would you introduce yourself quickly?
Hello everyone, I'm Amy Heavilin, and I've had the honor and privilege for the past 4 years to serve as your incumbent clerk and comptroller.
Kevin?
Good evening, everyone.
My name is Kevin Madok, candidate for Clerk of Court. I have been working for you for the past 12 years, the recent 4 as your Senior Director of Strategic Planning, and the 8 years prior to that as Assistant Finance Director under the former clerk, Danny Coolidge.
That's Kevin. Quick, you think the rest when we do this. All right. I'm sure Jennifer's going to give you an opportunity right now. So.
Actually, I was going to start with Amy. Amy, your opponent has been very critical of your leadership over the past 4 years as Clerk of Court. Do you think that any of that criticism has been fair? And if so, as you look back over the past 4 years, is there anything that you would have done differently to make the transition smoother?
You know, it's the transition from starting at the clerk's office has been very challenging. You know, everyone prior to this particular race has just discussed the high cost of living and keeping employees, and that is one of the biggest challenges that the clerk's office faced. When I took over in November, the previous administration was 42 years with the same administration and the same employees. Some of those people, about 18 of them, chose to retire. About 17 of them took jobs with other county agencies, and then the rest of those have moved out of Monroe County to where they could afford to live. 68% of my staff at the clerk's office turned over, which is extremely high. So we had some challenges with that. We also had mandates from the state that we were required to achieve certain elements at the clerk's office for e-recording and e-filing.
This is for Kevin Madok. You're quoted in the keynote as saying, by running, I'm basically saying that I can do a better job as clerk, and I firmly believe that I can. Can you tell us one way you think you would do things differently?
Basically, the issue is about leadership. And leadership is one of those terms that's difficult to define, but you recognize it by symptoms, kind of like a disease where you don't know what causes it, but you know what the symptoms are. And if you have an organization where the turnover is massive, and it continues to this day, that's a symptom of a problem. I worked in the finance department for 8 years, and there was 6 supervisors that reported to me. The day I started, and 8 years later, the day I left, all 6 of those people were the same people. That's a symptom or a sign of leadership. And I believe what I would bring to the office is leadership, and it would be evident through the symptoms. Less turnover, audits filed on time, clean audits, and competent service to the public.
Hi, this question is for the incumbent, Amy. I know this was kind of asked earlier, but I mean, your office, your tenure as clerk has just taken so many hits, and there have been cited several accounting problems in 2014 that resulted in delayed payments. And I mean, what confidence should voters have that this is never going to happen again? Or I mean, these things are right there in these reports.
It's easy to criticize until you walk a mile in the clerk's shoes. And one thing that I can say is you're correct. Everything is documented. Now the spin that's been put on that documentation is amazing. And I would encourage all of the supporters and voters to go out and actually read the reports in which the clerk has been criticized for. My very first year, I was closing the books, and the clerk, and this is documented by our external auditors, needed to reopen the books from 2005 to 2012 because it had previous administration and the audits had neglected to put in the assessments for all the wastewater accounting. The assessments had to be, the books had to be reopened. We reported this to our auditors. We needed to open those books. We needed to ask for an extension in order to do so. And once those books and records were opened, the auditors had an obligation to report what's called a prior period adjustment for all of those assessments, and that is in the reports. So yes, we did take a lot of criticism, but all the facts were not put out on the table as they really were. A spin was placed on them.
This question is for Kevin. You have experience in the finance department, but with nearly 1,000 distinct duties in the clerk's office, there must be some areas in your work that, in the trenches, that were not covered. How do you plan to gain technical expertise in these new areas while at the same time fulfilling the duties that the clerk cannot delegate to others on the staff?
That clearly demonstrates the value of institutional knowledge and a stable workforce. The clerk's office historically has been one of the most stable government agencies in Monroe County. It historically has had very low turnover. There is still pockets of that institutional knowledge there. I will not go in there and pretend I know everything, change policies and procedures, and move people around that have expertise in one area. These are things that have been done, and that is part of the cause of the problems we're having. So I would, again, take advantage of the institutional knowledge that is there and start rebuilding it. As an example, in finance, we had policies and procedures that worked very well. The new clerk came in and dismantled those policies and procedures, thinking that there was a better way. Well, it's not working, and I would have to rebuild those policies and procedures. And on the court side, again, there are people that know what to do, and then there are positions that have been turned over and the expertise and the knowledge has left. That's going to be one of my biggest challenges, is bringing back people or training people to do the positions and giving them the leadership and support to carry through the positions, have pride in their workmanship, and stay with the office.
Can I have a 30-second rebuttal?
Okay, Mark says yes.
I'd like to say there have been new GASB rules in 2 of the 3 years that I've been there, and some of those required complex and extraordinary time to analyze those things and put those implementations into place. These are mandated things. These aren't things that I just randomly went in and just changed. These were mandated by the Government Accounting Standards Board, and we must comply with those.
Amy, back to the topic of turnover, since you mentioned it. What now are you doing to attract and retain competent employees so that we can avoid this problem in the future? Has the clerk's office taken any effort to attract those employees and to keep the employees that you have?
Of course, it's a challenge, just like it is for other county agencies in order to do that. But yes, the staff that we have been actually I have a mentor clerk, actually, a more senior clerk that's elected in a different county, and we go to trainings, we invite them down, we allow our staff to go and see the offices and see all the great works that the other clerks are doing, because we really do all very similar jobs. We're ministerial in nature, we partnership with a lot of agencies here, but the training for our staff, provide them education that they need. But it is a challenge to pay wages with the budgets that we do have. And it'll continue to be a struggle. I mean, the resources are
How many open positions do you have currently, I guess? Are there open positions now that have not been filled?
There's less than maybe 4 out of 100. I started with 100. There's 96 budgeted slots now, and I think that we have 4 vacancies.
Kevin, I want to go back to what you would do that's different. You're reported in Keys Weekly as saying you plan to transfer the same tax-saving efforts you used in the County Strategic Planning Department to restore fiscal discipline and efficient use of taxpayer dollars. Please give us an example of the biggest tax-saving idea.
Okay, obviously, I can't save the taxpayers $30 million in the clerk's office because that would be about 5 or 6 years' budgets. Probably the single biggest area is I'm the last county employee that had the skills and experience required to close the county's books and prepare for the audit. Since I left, that duty, which has always been done by county staff, has been farmed out to consultants. You have spent over $500,000 paying other people to do the work that staff is supposed to do. The positions are there. It's not outsourcing, it's double sourcing. So I have the knowledge, and there's excellent people there. They just have not received the proper training. I have the experience and knowledge to provide that training. I will not take the easy route and pay outsiders to do work where all I have to do is train the staff to do it. This year we paid a firm in Tallahassee to do this work. So not only are you taking your tax dollars and paying it outside, it's not even staying in the community, it's going outside. Again, the tax saving is a philosophy, but for a concrete example, closing the books and preparing for the audit is probably the biggest single dollar savings because it's taken a tremendous amount of outsiders' work to do that under the current administration.
This is for everybody, I guess. As someone that uses the search features on the website like every day, all day, I mean, it's just, it's kind of hard to read. They're just kind of notes, like this just says like a name. Is there anything that can change? I mean, you know, Pacer is the federal government site, which is not free, but it's like super awesome, and you can get like motions and rulings, and this system just seems a little lacking. It could just be, but is there anything that you could change?
It's for both of you, but Kevin's down one, so Kevin, respond, then you respond to a rebut.
Okay, the website, I personally don't like it that much, and it's not the Incumbent's website. It's pretty much the same website from before, so it's not a slam on her. But I have heard from attorneys that love it. And I think the difference is if you know, I may be insulting the questioner.
I already did it, so.
If you know exactly what you're doing, apparently it's fairly easy to use. My philosophy would be for it to be...
Yes, you pretty much insulted.
Okay. My philosophy would be for the novice or non-attorney type person to be able to use it just as easily as a legal expert. So I would look at redesigning it more of menus and hitting buttons. Right now, if you want to look for deeds, you have to know what kind of warranty deed or special deed, and you have to pick them out of a list of 40 or 50 choices. And if you don't know that you're looking for deeds or it can be filed in a couple of different formats, then you may miss what you're looking for. It needs to be redesigned.
Okay, Amy, you have 30 seconds to insult Gwen.
Actually, the website, in my opinion, is a bit cumbersome, and that's why that for the past year and a half, I've actually been using a vendor who has helped me build and design a new user-friendly website. So if you go out and look at Orange County, Florida's Clerk's website, ours is going to be much user-friendly, such as theirs. Very similar.
This is a question for Amy. Can you describe in terms the people who aren't a CPA that don't want to read 235-page audit report, what the significant deficiency was and what steps have been taken to make sure those don't repeat in this year's audit report?
Yes, actually the significant deficiency was regarding the training that our staff was getting, and if folks would go out and one would read the actual report issued in 2015, you'll see where our external auditors actually praised the clerk's office for maintaining the same, building stability and gaining confidence in the staff to get things done in a timely manner. And for the prior period adjustments, I think that's what the main concern was for most of the readers. And I know that's been talked about a lot. And again, that was a requirement, a required element from our external auditors to place those findings in there. But I think you'll read all the significant improvements that we have made in 2015. And I think we've overcome those challenges.
I'd like to rebut that prior period adjustment since she's brought it up twice at some point.
Real quick, Kevin.
Okay. First of all, significant deficiency is the second worst criticism. That's not praise. That prior period adjustment was a management decision to change the way we accounted for things. It was not necessary. And frankly, the way I accounted for the wastewater was the appropriate way to do it. She chose to account for it differently, which is fine. But her method, it was not required. Her method ends up putting a severe distortion on the balance sheet, which I would never stand for. So no, it was not required prior period adjustments. She chose to do it.
We'll do our lightning round. That way we'll get one more set of questions in here, and we'll try to not have rebuttals to these.
This will be for Amy. If you're re-elected for another 4 years, what are the top 2 initiatives that you will work to implement or improve in your second term?
The things that we're working on right now are for the real estate community and the bankers. We would like to go to e-recording, and I've started that. Again, we've also designed and built the new user-friendly website. Now we're strategically timing that because I've been working with the Florida Supreme Court in order to develop a public access portal, which will allow all court images except those that are exempted by law to be seen and searched for by the public, which right now is not there. All you can see is like an executive summary of what happens with the courts. So that and going paperless, I'm working with the courts now, but that takes both the local chief judge approval as well as the Supreme Court approval. It's not something that I can just say, hey, let's go paperless, and it happens overnight.
Amy, what was the staff turnover in the last 12 months?
It was very low, I think roughly somewhere between 10 or 11%.
We should go for Kevin for a couple of
Okay, Kevin, you've been running for office for a while. What was your reaction when Ron Saunders jumped in? Did you feel blindsided, or?
I was not blindsided. I knew that was coming. And again, it's a democratic process, and theoretically, the more people that run, theoretically, the better the outcome. Frankly, I have a hard time understanding or squaring Ron's background with the duties of the clerk. He's a skilled career politician, and the clerk has a lot of responsibilities, but the part that takes technical expertise is the financial accounting and financial management portion. And I just don't see that professionally in Mr. Saunders' background. But again, it's the process, and I welcome it.
Okay, we'll go with Kevin again. One of the areas of the clerk's responsibilities is keeping all the court documents, jury management, and accounting for fines and fees. What's your top priority to improve the services by the clerk to the county judges?
Timeliness and accuracy. There has been, that's, gotta be careful here. That's one of the areas where it's not very visible. If there's hiccups in accounting for the board's financial activity, it's visible because we have to work with those numbers. On the court side, it's all kept within the clerk's office, and there have been errors in recording and reporting to the state, fines and fees. There's a tremendous amount of recording and data collected by the Clerk of Court Operation Corporation, and my top priority would be to do that accurately and on a timely basis.
Okay, that's it for questions. Kevin keeps them light. Now 1 minute to give your closing statement, Kevin, and then Amy will end up.
Okay, well, I want to thank the panel for your excellent questions tonight. This race is about hiring someone to do the job as clerk for the next 4 years. Now, once a constitutional officer is elected, it is nearly impossible for them to be removed from office. But every 4 years, the voters get the opportunity to revisit their decision. And that's where we are now. It's clear there's been problems with the clerk's office, and it's always also very easy to confuse the issues. And that's why I'm sticking with verifiable facts and keeping it simple. Huge and constant turnover that continues to this day. Heavily criticized audits that are filed late, and a failure to meet Supreme Court mandates for technology adaptation and enhancements. These shortcomings are costing you money. I have the proven track record to fix these problems. I will restore accountability of the clerk's office, and I'm the most qualified candidate running in this race. Please vote Kevin Madok, August 30th, and again, November 8th. Thank you.
As the incumbent clerk, I think I've proven and demonstrated the ability to be flexible and modernize the office. I'm very proud of the accomplishments that we've achieved in the past 4 years. We've established a countywide fraud hotline. We've installed new equipment and technological updates. We completed the e-filing for the legal community. We have the court access. We've provided them technology so that they can access the court documents in real time. The jury system we've updated, the finance system we've updated. We've put in automated redaction programs that have been implemented, and our staff have received national recognition for excellence in financial reporting. So please remember me on August the 30th, and again in November, Amy Heavilin as your clerk and comptroller. Thank you.
Thank you both. Our final race of the night is the Democratic primary for U.S. Congress. This is a seat currently held by Carlos Curbelo. Will Joe Garcia and Annette Taddeo come on up?
Okay.
Well, we have a little time, and since we're picking on Gwen tonight, I know she's using the technology available to her to mention that Pedro, her dog, had a little spot tonight, which is really cool. All right, we don't want to keep everybody too late, but this is a big race. It's extremely important. Get right to it. Joe, can you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Joe Garcia, and it's good to be home.
Annette?
My name is Annette Taddeo, and I'm running for Congress to represent us in Washington, D.C.
Ryan, we will be starting off.
Okay. This is to Joe Garcia. Welcome back. You may not be so happy when you hear the question. Because it's a null bit. Annette Taddeo claims you're a flawed candidate because of the events that led to the jail sentence for your age for the orchestrating of fraudulent online absentee ballot request scheme. This is likely to be a tight race with the Republican incumbent. Wouldn't it have been better for you to pass on this election cycle?
I want to thank you for the question. I really appreciate it because all of you have been getting all this negative literature in your mailbox. You know me. We dealt with this issue, we dealt it right from the start. And we were exonerated. And now, we can go back and keep living this Benghazi-style retrial of this, or we can deal with the problem, and we dealt with the problem. Now, we can relitigate it all that Ms. Taddeo wants, but those are the facts. We dealt with it, and the difference is, once that was done, and even as it was going on, we kept serving this community, dealing with each and every single one of you on problems that were important to us, and fighting and winning things that were important for South Florida. This is going to be a tougher race. But you saw it last time. The Koch brothers spent millions against me. The difference is you have someone with experience in campaigning, experience in Congress, and in a transformative time in our U.S. government, you're going to have someone that speaks for you and for the issues that matter to you.
May I?
Okay, fine. 30 seconds.
Thank you. I would like to say that Joe Garcia is right. We've already seen this movie. The Koch brothers will spend a tremendous amount of money attacking whoever the candidate is. But we've already seen the ending when he's the candidate, and it's not a good one for Democrats. We want to get the seat back, and the only way to get the seat back is with a candidate that is not flawed. And by the way, the issues that I bring up in the mailers can be followed to a T. I give you every time the link to actually, okay.
What?
Hi, thanks for coming. Okay, these, like, this is just like today. No, I'm just teasing. I get a lot of these. How much do these cost? What's posted?
Is that your question, or?
It is my question, because and the other thing is just why? Why?
And who?
Both.
Okay, both. Sorry, Annette first.
They cost a lot of money, and I'm very proud that I have raised most of my money for people like you. Our donations are an average contribution of $100 or less. So yes, it costs a lot of money, but I think it is my job as a candidate to educate you. And what I didn't get to finish is that at the bottom of every mailer I send you a link so you can check the facts. The fact is, when the Miami Herald or any newspaper wrote about all the scandals, we all read them. And I was very disappointed myself when Joe Garcia was somebody that I supported heavily, to the point that I actually had somebody living in my house during his campaign. That's how much I supported him. But I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican, you do not take the public's vote for granted, and you do not use the fact that you want to get elected so that you can just get elected and cheat along the way. There were proof that he knew all along what was going on. And by the way, it was more than just the ballot fraud. There was also the phantom candidate scandal. Thank you.
Look, I could deal with all the mail that you've gotten attacking me, and you've gotten dozens of pieces attacking me personally on things that are just not true. And part of the reason we've got to send that information is we've got to change it. Now, I've always considered Annette a friend, and this position that she's shocked about something. Look, the only thing that she's shocked about is that her campaign is in a desperate position, and so they have to throw whatever's out there to make it stick. What you know from me, and you know me, is that we've dealt with all these issues, and we've dealt with the issues that matter to you, and we've solved them for you.
It's time. So, one thing I know this is going to be a hotly contested election, but we want to focus on the questions that the panelists ask. And because she did ask how much it cost, and then we gave you a little leeway because it wasn't very clear. No, you're fine. But I guess to try to keep it under control, we're going to be a little tougher on responding to the question that was asked. So,
I'd like to shift to policy, and this one's for Annette. Black Lives Matter. Please respond if you agree, and if so, how these words will shape your activities and legislative priorities in your first term.
I have lived racism myself. I moved to Alabama at first when I moved from Columbia. So I know that we have a long way to go as a country to bring us together. And I think that we definitely still have racism going on in our country. But we also have wonderful, dedicated police officers that are out there putting their lives on the line for us. I think our duty as elected officials is to bring people together and to invest in these communities. As someone who made it because of a school grant and was able to graduate college and was able to build the American dream, I know that we need to develop opportunities for everyone, regardless of their color of their skin, and my accent is coming out.
What was that?
That was for Annette.
Okay, sorry.
This question will be for Joe. Let's talk Cuba. We have an embargo that's been in place for 55 years. You're running for a district which includes a significant portion of the Florida Keys. Do you recognize any benefits to the Keys of lifting the embargo? And if so, under what circumstances would you support a repeal of the Helms-Burton Act?
Well, I'll go further. Let's begin with the fact that, well, I was in Congress, and there are people in this room that worked with me to begin to ease these sanctions and to move forward on those sanctions. When we supported Barack Obama for the presidency, one of the things we negotiated was exactly what he did at the beginning part, which is release restrictions on investment in dollars, right? Dollars so you can send your family, and travel limits. But I'm a believer that we need to lift the embargo. The reality is, and when you do that, Helms-Burton obviously goes away with it, but the reality is there's no community on earth, including communities in Cuba, that will benefit more from an opening up with Cuba than the Florida Keys, and in particular Key West. And its historic relationship with Cuba, I think, will only create wealthier and opportunity in this community.
Did I answer your question? Respond as well?
30 seconds.
Absolutely. I was very proud to have run for Lieutenant Governor, been the Democratic nominee for Lieutenant Governor, and we actually were the first ones, I think, in history of Florida candidates that actually said the embargo hasn't worked after 50 plus years. And you know, it's really interesting. Nobody thought that a Democratic candidate running for governor and lieutenant governor could win the Cuban American vote, but we did. So I already have been very vocal about the importance of lifting the embargo and how it hasn't worked. And of course, the Helms-Burton Act goes with that as well.
Thank you. Brian.
Annette, despite all of the literature that's come through our doors, we seem to be mainly talking in an attack on Joe. What I did find was your statement on your website that you will fight to make sure all of South Florida's hardworking families get a fair shot to succeed. Can you give us one policy that would benefit families in the Keys?
I'm a small business owner, so I am someone who has a little bit of experience succeeding, and I know that sometimes it's unusual to hear from a Democrat, or the Republicans would like to say, as a business owner and past chair of the chamber, about the importance of investment in our small businesses. So I think that that's one of the ways. Most of the businesses here are small businesses, small business owners who don't get to have a lobbyist in Washington, who don't get to have the big special interest checks that we see going to politicians. We need a voice of someone that actually knows what it's like, has actually met a payroll every single 2 weeks for the last 21 years. And that's one of the things that I will do, is bring that voice to Washington that we need as someone who has done it.
Joe, it's been a while with the Democratic Congressional Committee, I think I said it wrong, they endorsed Ms. Taddeo, and why, and does it matter to you?
No, they didn't endorse me when I ran the first time for this, and what I'm proud of is all the colleagues that have endorsed me. I have a history of working within all the different groups that have stood with me because of my effectiveness. Look, I understand that people get in this early and people make commitments. I wanted to make a commitment that I could serve this community, as I have in the past, and they drew a district. They've redrawn this district 3 different times, 2 of them to keep me from running for Congress. But the reality is they redrew it, and the court went in, and then they drew a district that a Democrat can hold and make differences. And you all know me. You know how hard I fought to hold this district. You know against who I fought to hold this district. And you saw the millions of dollars that poured into this. And we lost by just a little bit. Now that district has been redrawn, to answer part of her question, with an almost 2.5 point more advantage than before. So we won this by 11. Obama won this seat by 7. Now it's a 9.5 performing district. And so when the court decided, I was very forthright. I told Annette that I was waiting for the court to decide, and when the court decided, we got it.
I'd like to rebut, because it's inaccurate.
Well, but she didn't. You can get it in something else. Mark?
Okay, this question's for Annette. Do you support the Democratic platform that calls for significant infrastructure and renewable energy investments, and what steps will you take to ensure that District 26 gets a share of the investment?
I absolutely 100% support it. I am a big advocate of renewable energy, and I also think that we need to invest in infrastructure, and definitely the Keys is one of the places that needs to see some of that investment, as well as I think that we are seeing a huge problem with water in our state. And I think that it's going to take investment, additional investment from the federal government, for example, to build bridges in certain areas of 8th Street or Tamiami Trail, so that we can allow the flow of the water, because of course many years ago we didn't think about that, and and now the water is going in other ways instead of coming south like it should. So it's become a huge problem. So those are some of the projects that I think I would prioritize, but I would support and 100% support, and I'm very eager to get the funding and to prioritize our area as a place to get it.
This is for Joe. The average class of 2015 college graduate with student loan debt will have to pay back an average of $35,000 for an undergraduate degree, and oftentimes hundreds of thousands of dollars for a professional degree. Do you believe as a society that we have a moral obligation to prevent, to not burden our young adults with this excessive cost, and what will you do as a member of Congress to control the cost of higher education?
That's a great question, and one that we received tremendous success at. Right? When we were in Congress, they tried to reduce Pell Grants. We got them increased. They tried to raise the interest rate on loans. It's the lowest that it's been in 10 years, precisely for the legislation we put forward. But look, I'm a believer in public education across the board, from pre-K and early child care through elementary, junior high, high school, and two-year college, which Mark alluded to in the platform. I think it's important. I went to Miami-Dade Community College, and I have to tell you, I came from a lower middle class family. Had it not been for Miami-Dade College, I would have never been able to go to university. I would have never been able to get a law degree. It made a difference. It made a difference in my life, and we have to have a commitment, because the challenge of the future is not anywhere else except in the mind. And if you look at wealth creation in our country today, it comes from arts of the mind, from things that people do, think, technology, computers, information. And without an education, you're not competitive. Part of the resistance we find today, the resistance we find with a lot of people, is that they're scared of the future because they're not prepared for it. They don't feel like they're part of it. And as much as we can try to go back, we've got to step forward. And that's a place where America is second to none. Of the 200 best universities on earth, 189 of them are in the United States. They should be filled with American kids.
I'm going to keep asking if I can respond.
We got a whole other round now. Well, if you, that's okay.
Yeah, you can answer.
Okay, 30 seconds.
This is very important to me. As I told you, I actually went to school on a grant to university, and I had the hardest time getting into a university because my English was so limited. So I find it interesting that the congressman says he's all for this and for the Pell Grants and for the loans, because he actually voted for a bill that would have reduced temporarily the rates of student loans, but then it made it to go up over time. And that's not what our college students need.
We get a rebuttal here, or just? Actually, since, no, you make a good point, Joe. I'm sorry. This is a little different race than the others. She did make a statement about you, so 20 seconds to rebut. We can't be here all night.
I appreciate the fact that she has no record to run on, so she's got to run against my own. But let's be clear. When it came to student loans, we acted, and we made a difference. We increased Pell Grants. We lowered the interest rates, which today we're beneficiaries of. That was going to go up. We made a difference, and that's exactly what you're supposed to do in Congress. Make a difference for people. Now, I know philosophically you may not agree with it, but that's what happened.
Thanks. Okay, Brian. Joe. This should go to Joe. Just to keep everybody in, we kind of keep track, and I try to balance it back and forth so it doesn't get too far out.
Joe, I want to bring you back to the keys. You're quoted in the Miami community newspapers as saying you intend to focus on local issues and bring dollars home to strengthen our economy and the jobs market. Can you give us one policy proposal that would bring jobs and money to the keys?
I can do better than that, Brian. I can tell you that we brought millions of dollars for water and quality projects back to the Keys. We brought hundreds of millions of dollars.
No, going forward.
No, I got it. But but backwards tells us a lot of times from where you're going to go forward. So the reality is that what we have to do is work on projects that make a difference in the Keys, right? Water improvement projects, environmental restoration, they're all part of infrastructure spending. More importantly, you're talking about public housing. No place, I want you to understand, you live in the most expensive place to live in Florida with the least amount of services to help you get by. And so the federal government can be a player in that. They can have, because infrastructure spending beyond bridges and roads and airports also includes public housing and making a difference. And if the federal government doesn't participate, there's no way you can do it alone. Just like the environmental challenges that the Keys have, you cannot do it alone. Part of what you're going to see in the next administration, and it's in the platform, over $285 billion. And what you want is someone in there who has the experience of dealing with the colleagues that are in there to make sure we get our fair share. Because I'm a believer that you're going to see a huge change in government and how it treats the country. Because the country needs to move forward. We spent years bickering, years attacking each other, years of this kind of negative campaigning that you've had in your mailbox. And what we need to do is solve the problems of the people in our country.
This is for both, it's pretty quick. You have to run every 2 years when you have this seat. It seems like you have to spend half your time campaigning. Is it a problem? Can it ever be changed? But I mean, can you just talk a little bit about that?
And Gwen, there's no pretty quick questions with these guys. Since you've run for this, go 60 seconds for each of you on this one. Joe,
yeah, I'll give you an answer. Campaign finance reform. When you look at what makes these races almost untenable, where we both spend the majority of our time on the phone raising, and there are people in this room that I call on a regular basis that you come up in my Rolodex, it's precisely because there's no campaign finance reform. If you, and I love hearing local candidates talk about how much they hate fundraising, you can only imagine this process. It is ridiculous, it is broken, and it is taking away your vote, your ability to make a difference. And it's, quite frankly, it's disgusting. And so what is going to happen if this election goes as I hope it will? You're going to get campaign finance reform. It's going to stick because the Supreme Court will have a progressive majority. And this all stops. And we go to public financing, which makes a difference in your lives and certainly in our lives. And will make a difference for the entire country.
Annette, your thoughts.
Citizens United was the worst decision that I believe that has truly affected our democracy. So we have to deal with it, and I'm willing to campaign every 2 years and do what it takes to fight for our community. I, however, can tell you one thing I will not do that my opponents, plural, cannot say. I will not take sugar money. I think our community and our state has been severely affected by the influence of sugar. And I know both sides of the aisle take it, and I think it's time we have a leader that's willing to stand up and say no more.
Can we stay with the Citizens United for just a minute? And what is the answer to that? Should the House of Representatives be proposing a constitutional amendment, or where do we go to make a change? And we'll start with Joe.
I don't think a constitutional amendment will pass. You know why? Because there won't be enough money on the other side to stop it. The reality is that this is something that's baked in to corporations and their money, and so you won't be able to get it done. And so I believe it has to come through legislation. It has to come out of Congress. The Supreme Court has to uphold it. We have to overturn Citizens United for us to have a prayer. The idea that a corporation is treated exactly the same as a human being is ridiculous. And that's the system we're living under. And unless we do that, I don't see a solution to this. We can try a constitutional amendment, and I'm all for it, I'll propose it. But the idea of getting that through the entire country is almost impossible.
Ditto.
Jennifer.
This will be for Annette. You've stated publicly that you will fight for long overdue comprehensive immigration reform. What does comprehensive immigration reform mean to you, and do you support a path for citizenship for those currently living in the United States illegally?
That's exactly what it means to me. Comprehensive immigration reform means a path to citizenship. Because we need to bring all the people that are living here undocumented out of the shadows. We are already, as a matter of fact, investing in our kids through their education, and yet we're throwing those kids' education away because we're not letting them go on to be a part of our society. That is just not the America that I know my father fought in World War II and Korea for. That is what I believe, and I believe also that as a business owner, that we don't have enough visas. And that is a problem that the businesses have told us about the issues, and we need to increase that quota to help those businesses to bring in those expertise.
I'd love to go on.
No. We're right at time, but if everybody doesn't mind, we'll do one more round. It's a very important race. Okay, good.
Okay,
right.
This is for Joe. What is your view on limitations on the possession of assault weapons and restricting large capacity magazines? And how do you view the conflict these would create against the Second Amendment?
Well, look, I agree with doing both, and I agree with that we need to enforce the existing statutes, but we need to get rid of assault weapons, get rid of heavy magazines. But I want to go back to a question Annette answered, and it's not to be critical of her. But the reality is when police officers come up to a car, they're thinking the same thing. They're scared too, and so we have to regulate guns. And I want you to understand, it's not a restriction to the Constitution. We have freedom of speech in this country. You don't have a right to scream fire when you're sitting here. All those freedoms come with limitations and responsibilities, and we have to have limitations and responsibilities when you talk about the freedom to hold carry a weapon, particular weapon designed to be used in war that is meant to maim and destroy human flesh. And I just don't see for the life of me why we need citizens to carry that, particularly citizens who have a criminal record, which in Florida, by the way, in this district is the largest gun show in the country where you can walk in and buy an AK with absolutely no background check. It's just unacceptable, and I think it's damaging our democracy, hurting our country, and hurting the brave men and women who protect us. Because police officers have to be thinking the same thing that all of us think about when we see something like this.
For both of you, do you support the federal minimum wage of $50 an hour? How on earth would that affect the keys? Do you know?
I do support it, and as I told you, I am a small business owner, and I believe that our employees are what makes our business run. They're the heart and soul of our business. And so I am someone that doesn't just believe in the minimum wage being a livable wage, but also I believe that, you know, we need to treat our employees well. And I follow my example. My employees have every type of benefit, from profit sharing to insurance to being paid properly. Obviously, they're not minimum wage employees, but nonetheless, I believe that our employees are our heart and soul. So that's why I'm a big believer in a livable wage. One more thing, since I have time. I do think that it's important for the economics of it all, because we have corporate welfare in essence. When these companies do not pay their employees a livable wage, the rest of us are providing corporate welfare when we have to help them from our tax dollars to live. So think about it.
I agree with that. I think it's tremendously important that we raise the minimum wage. It has to be done in a way that's incremental and that business can deal with it. But we also have to do much more to create fairness in the system today. The reality is that when you look across the system and when you look at working class families, they're way behind and falling further behind. Part of the anger that you see in the electorate is just the inability, no matter how hard you work, to get ahead. And that's just not been part of the American system. By the way, today corporations have larger profits and they're holding those dollars than ever before. And that's because we have a government that is unwilling to change tax policy, a government unwilling to force more investment, unwilling to create rules that put money back in the system. We need much more investment in infrastructure. When you create infrastructure jobs, because of federal mandates, those salaries are way above $15 an hour. which means they can go to your restaurants, they can spend it in your community, and they make a difference for everyone involved. But that requires a government that's actually doing something, not a government that is run now by vitocracy, right? The big interests don't let anything get done, so we're all losers, because they already won with the rules that exist. It's the rest of us that can't move forward.
Thank you both. We'll get your name tag here. Mark.
Here's one for Joe. You're familiar with the water quality issues in Florida, and the latest from Florida DEP is to issue regulations which increase the quantity and number of chemicals that can be in our waters. How bad does it have to get before the federal government should step in and bring some sense?
Well, Rick Scott told us it's Obama's fault. Let me tell you, that's a lie. And it's part of what's happening. You're not seeing this as a coincidence or as a mistake. This is purposeful. They have not enforced environmental laws. They don't care about environmental laws. They've stopped buying land, which we set aside specifically to buy land. And let's be clear, because this allows me to answer one of the ridiculous rebuttals. I do believe in buying sugar land, and we should. That's what the money's set aside for. But you can't vote on one vote that I've taken that has hurt Florida's environment. What you have seen is votes that help our environment, make a difference for us, and brings more money to South Florida, particularly water projects to protect the bay and the water here. And I'm a big believer that we have to hold FPL accountable for the tritium in the water, because this is something that makes a difference in people's lives. And this is something that everyone cares about.
You can rebut his rebuttal.
Thank you. Joe Garcia is right about one thing. I don't have a record of voting the wrong way. He does. And he said, you can't think of one vote. How interesting. There is one vote where he specifically voted to deregulate the water and to allow the states to do whatever they wanted. That is a vote that you took. I also want to bring up that I have been a huge advocate of buying the land, like we all voted for the government to do.
Thank you, Annette. Jennifer.
This will be for Annette.
And this will be the last question, and then we'll give you guys a closing statement, and then we'll let everybody go home.
There's a presidential race this year, in case you didn't know. Donald Trump's candidacy has obviously touched a nerve with some voters who feel neglected, disenfranchised with the government. I know you've been critical of Mr. Trump, but I'm not asking you to air that here. My question is, how do you respond to those voters who feel that the government has left them behind and they're not doing their job as we've elected them to do? How do you reach out to those voters, and what will you do differently in Congress?
Well, I think a lot of that frustration of those voters is a great question, and I've spoken to a lot of them. And the frustration from a lot of them is just the fact that they go through campaigns, make all kinds of promises, say one thing at home, like our current congressman, and then vote another way when they go to Washington. This is what people are tired of. Career politicians that are constantly just thinking of themselves and not of the people they are there to represent. That's why I'm actually really proud of the fact that so many of them have responded to me just saying, you know, I get it. I'm not supporting Trump because of the horrible things he says. But I believe that we need real public servants, and we need to, and that's not Donald Trump, but but we need people that are there to really fight for us, and I think that frustration is, well, worth it. I mean, they're right.
Okay. All right, Annette, closing statements, you're first, and then Joe, you'll end. Around a minute, if you can. I know you guys, give us your best.
I'm Annette Taddeo, and I'm running for Congress because I want to represent you in Washington. I am a self-made businesswoman who came to this country with little or no English, put myself through college thanks to Pell Grants. I really believe that we can have a voice that can represent us with honesty and integrity, and someone that already has carried this district in the election. He lost by 7 points. It is a district that wants a Democrat representing us in Congress, and I believe that I'm that Democrat. I look forward to earning your vote.
First of all, thank you, Hometown PAC, for inviting me. It's good to be home. You know, I live just up the road here, right by the Truman and Grinnell. And I want to thank you for coming out. I wish we could have events like this all over the district. This is a really unique place, and it was my great honor to represent it in Washington. I'd like you to give me that honor again, because we made a difference in your lives. If I look across this audience, for every 3 or 4 people, there's someone who we stepped in directly and made a difference in their lives, and I want to try to do that again, make a difference for each and every one of you. I've told this story before, but forgive me if you've heard me repeat it. You know, there's a wonderful thing about representing this district. When Congress people meet each other and they look at each other and they usually say where they're from. You know, there is a surefire way that we get our stuff done is because everybody, you know, when you say Miami, they look at you, you know, it's still questionable. But when you say to someone, I represent the Florida Keys or I represent Key West, you get a big smile. And we are something so special. And it was an honor to represent you, and if you give me that honor again, I make sure that your voice will be heard, and will be heard loud and clear for the interests that matter to each and every one of you. Thank you for coming here tonight.
Thank you both. Thank all of you. Thank the studios. AC held up. Hope everybody has a wonderful evening. We will see you for the general election.